welcome to the great Jeff Charles. Do you want to do his intro real quick?
Yeah, of course. So this is the great Jeff Charles. He suffers from internalized racism. He's an alleged satirist, which, as we know, means he's a professional producer of hate speech. Other things he does, he's the host of a Fresh Perspective podcast, Liberty Spaces, and is a contributor for redstate.com.
He's also got a new Substack, which I'm really excited for. It's a satirical, I think, piece or a satirical Substack, and it goes by The Smattering. So look out for that. So welcome, Jeff. And Jeff, just to give you an idea of how we do things, we do have a producer, and he does God's work, if I'm being honest, for us. And just, so to give you an idea of how we are, we're pretty relaxed, but are not afraid to get into the weeds of things. So don't be afraid of that. But also, he's English, and I lacked sort of attention growing up, and so we are like comedy. We like making jokes, and we make very dry. So sometimes you'll hear something, and it's like, is this guy being? It's like, no, we're just very dry. And if it sounds like we're just trying to be funny, then we are. So just be aware of that.
So I mean, I know we didn't really talk about the topics, but I was told that we were going to talk about the virtues of ism, right? I mean, that's
correct.
That's what I prepared for.
Right.
Also,
no,
look,
absolutely.
Those are the topics du jour, you might say.
Yes.
Sure.
We're all wearing outfits exclusively designed by Balenciaga for this episode.
Nice. Yeah, because I figured, because I wanted to really make the case for why Kanye West, or otherwise known as Ye, had some pretty good points about about Hitler's positive attributes.
Look, I'll say this: he was very punctual.
Yes,
he was always on time. Always on time. Never missed a deadline. That man, and
he loved dogs. He was nice to dogs.
Enjoy dogs.
He did like dogs. Spoke excellent German for an Austrian.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, artist in his own right. So
some might say, yeah.
Underrated artist, maybe.
Underrated artist.
I mean, if you had a T5 for like homicidal maniacs, like he's got to be on there, right? So
I would think so.
Yeah. Also, just like to say as an aside, shout out to Rumble for hosting this episode. We really appreciate it.
We're on YouTube, but every time we record a show, Ben's like, "It's just a matter of time. It's just
like, look, honestly, Jeff, it's got to the point where I'm now going to look at it as a badge of honor the day that we have to move to Rumble. Like, if that doesn't happen, we haven't made it. Like, we're not producing the stuff that we want to produce until we get banned from somewhere. Because
maybe I need to step my game up, because on my YouTube channel I haven't been banned yet. I mean, I have had an episode removed, and actually it was one where I had my partner in Liberty, Donnie Anthony, on my show, and she started talking about the election, and then YouTube was like, "No, we don't like that. We're going to take that episode down." I was like, "Thanks, Donnie. Appreciate it."
You fucked me for the last time, Don. No, yeah.
Right,
no,
so
Donnie's great. Yeah.
Just before we came on air, we had already started to talk about. We were sort of warming up. We were just starting to talk about how the most surprising thing that you learn as a white guy moving from the left to the right politically is that black people can think for themselves. Comes as quite a shock, and the more you meet of them, that shock doesn't subside. So like, I've got two of you here now, so I'm alarmingly outnumbered.
Some would say that's 3 too many. Yeah.
So
probably. Yeah. I mean, my life was different when I used to be a black man until 2020, when I stopped being one, when I voted for Trump. But thank you. As a former black man I've noticed that, a lot of black people don't think the way the media says we think. So when you see black people who have more conservative values, that's not a shock. Now, a lot of them still vote Democrat, But we were talking about Second Amendment. I mean, a lot of black people own guns, legally and illegally. But still, I mean, I'm pro Second Amendment, so the word illegal shouldn't come into play when you talk about gun ownership, but it does. But I mean, especially over the past 2 years, the numbers have shown that black gun ownership, especially black women, has been skyrocketing. So the idea that black people are against gun rights, it's absurd. I mean, and that's why, you know, one of the things I call out is the racism of gun control laws. I mean, I'm sure you guys are familiar with Monterey, all gun control is racist. I agree, because a lot of these laws disproportionately make it hard for black people to obtain firearms.
Absolutely. Yeah. And they were historically designed to be so, which I don't, you know, it's interesting how a lot of people are unaware of that history. I don't know if you're, I mean, I know you're probably very familiar with it.
Yeah.
So, and it's always interesting to me how that part gets left out. And I always wonder why. I mean, we can get into this later, but it's part of this whole thing. And I've talked about Ben with this. It's like, man, if you know, I've seen you talk before. I'm not sure where your political leanings are now. I think they're probably, it would be safe for me to summarize it as complicated. It's complicated, maybe, or but leaning.
Even more complicated than it used to be nowadays.
That is fair, and that is a feeling I can subscribe to. And it's interesting because I've talked to Ben about this. Like I've said, like, man, if they could just, if the right could just yield on that one little thing, like, you know, if you had one person to just be like, you know, the history of gun owning law, like you're striking two birds with one stone here, right. You know. And I've always thought, like, why don't they do that? But maybe that's something we can talk. You know, we can talk about it now, but we can talk about it later.
This is something like, so Jeff, again, we spoke about this off air as well. The advantage that I have, this being the first time we've met, is that I can be the sort of representative of the audience, and so I can do the exploring that the audience would do if you were in my position right now. So, like, were you always conservative leaning? Did you make any kind of transition as you grew up? Like, where did it begin? Were you always this outspoken? Where did it start?
So my journey, my political journey, began basically on September 12th, 2001, right after 9/11. I kind of maybe paid attention here and there to politics, but after 9/11, after that happened, I started to pay a little bit more attention, because that had everybody, that rocked our nation. And, you know, and it was to the point to where, you know, I felt that it was important for folks like myself to understand what's going on in the world, what's going on outside of the country, what's going on inside of the country. I still wasn't as deep into it as I am now, but I started paying more attention. And back then, I supported more on the Democrat side, mainly because that was just the thing to do. I mean, everybody hated Bush, and so I just figured that that's, you know, where I was. Although I never fell into the trap of thinking that Republicans were racist necessarily, because I soon discovered that you got racists on both sides. And the racism on the left is one of the things that turned me off. And so, you know, fast forward to say to 2005, I mean, the only Democrat vote that I did was voting for John Kerry and voting for Democrats on that ticket. And after that, as I started to evolve, as I started to get more deeper into politics, I also started listening to more talk radio. Not necessarily Rush Limbaugh. Everybody has a Rush Limbaugh story. I don't have that. I didn't really get my conservative from him. But the thing is, I was always conservative, and that's what I discovered. I was raised more conservative, but I just didn't realize it. So I was listening to, you know, Dennis Prager. I was back in Southern California at the time. I was born and raised there. Now I'm in Texas. But I was listening to Dennis Prager, Michael Medved, Hugh Hewitt, you know, all these conservative talk radio shows. And I found that, you know, I would disagree with them a lot. I'd be yelling at the radio, and I had a job where I drove a lot. And so, but on other issues, I'd be like, okay, yeah, I agree with that. And then as time went on, I realized I don't have much in common with these Democrats. And so I became more like mainstream conservative. Even when I was a Democrat, you know, I was still pro-life. Like, I was never far to the left. So if I would have stayed at the Democratic Party, by now I probably would have been a Republican because it shifted so far to the left. I supported the war in Afghanistan when I was younger. Iraq, sort of, kind of. I was a little antsy on it. I was like, I don't know if we should be doing this. But Saddam's a bad guy, but I don't know. But, and then time went on. I was more war hawkish back then than I am now. And then later, when I realized I had more in line with Republicans, that's kind of how I voted. I didn't vote for Obama. I voted for McCain. I voted for Romney. And and
that was visceral. That was visceral in your tone.
Yeah. Like even saying those words made me throw up in my mouth a little bit, honestly. But around 2016, I had started becoming like a freelance writer. I would ghost write for like a blog post and stuff like that. I would do content marketing, but I was always a good writer. So I was basically doing it as a way to make more extra money on the side.
Right.
But then I was thinking, it would be really nice if I could make money just by writing some articles about politics, because I'm already passionate about it. It's a lot of fun and it's cool. I never dreamed that I'd be doing what I'm doing now. That wasn't even on my radar. And so I was on a site called Upwork looking for writing jobs, and I came across conservative website needs writers. And I was like, okay, let me apply for this. I had written a few political articles here and there for free, but nothing major. And that's where I met Lisa and Tim Donner at Liberty Nation, who I still write for.
Nice.
And they brought me on, and I started on January 20th, 2017, when Trump was inaugurated. Over that time period, and actually this started beginning even before this, but I found that I wasn't really much in line with the Republican Party anymore. I was going more libertarian. So I started identifying more as a conservatarian because I still had some conservative leanings. And what I did most aligned with the Republican Party as far as what I focused on. I wasn't focused on the liberty movement as much. I was keeping an eye on it. I was always watching, listening to the podcast, but I wasn't part of the party or anything like that. I just, I'd interact with them. I liked them because in my heart, I was more probably, even though I wouldn't have admitted it back then, I was probably more of an anarchist than anything else. But I understood that this is the reality that we have to deal with. And, the Republican Party is the closest to what I want. But even back then, I was criticizing the Republican Party all the time because of just all of its failures, especially when it comes to reaching minority voters. That was a big thing for me. Like, they wouldn't make the effort to reach black voters, but they had no problem talking shit about us from far away. So, and then they turn around and say, well, why don't more black people vote Republican? Well, maybe it's because you're a bunch of dumbasses and, people call you racist, and then you give them reasons to call you racist. So, yeah. And so, that has been a battle for me since I started doing this. And then, kind of recently, and it's funny because I was going back over some of my old tweets. In 2019, I was saying, I bet in a few years, I'm just going to go full anarcho-capitalist or anarchist. I mean, and then I had another one. I was like, you guys keep pissing me off. I'll go anarchist. And I was joking, of course. But now, I mean, after these past midterm elections, I've finally gotten there. Like, I was resisting it, honestly, because I wanted to a long time ago, but I'm like, I just don't know if that's the way to really affect change. I don't know if that's the best use of my talents. Maybe I can help the Republican Party kind of get its head out of its ass. And after these midterm elections, I was like, no, you guys want to lose. You don't want to win. Okay, can I cuss on the show? Right. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, you're. Yeah, I pay Tyler enough. It's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. All right. Yeah. Hopefully, I don't. So I don't offend his virgin ears.
Yeah. No, I think Tyler's going to be okay. So I'm interested. I'm curious because you chart a remarkably similar path. To mine. Maybe sans the anarcho. Like, I'm curious. Well, first question for those people who aren't necessarily familiar with the political sort of graphs or where the Overton window or the lingo like that. What exactly constitutes an anarcho-capitalist?
So, I mean, I'm still kind of trying this suit on, so it's weird for me to even say this out loud, being an anarchist. I don't identify as an anarcho-capitalist. I just keep it simple. Anarchy. I want anarchy. That's what I'm going for. But an anarcho-capitalist, or the type of anarchist that I would consider myself, is one who basically I would like the federal government gone. State level, if possible. If not, I might be able to tolerate that, because I do believe that people should be able to easily move between the communities that they want to live in. I don't think that the government should be involved in education or really much of anything. I don't believe that the government's, whatever government we have, the sole responsibility is to protect our rights. It's not to, try to make society a better place. It's not supposed to bring us into some utopia. It's not supposed to take care of us. That's actually, taking care of people is up to us, we the people. The government is supposed to make sure that our rights are not infringed on. I don't believe in laws I don't believe that a crime, anything should be labeled as a crime that doesn't affect other people. Like, you're not violating other people's rights. So if you're not stealing somebody's property, if you're not hurting them, if you're not attacking them or their loved ones, then it probably shouldn't be a crime. So for things like fraud, yeah, that should be a crime. If you're defrauding people, you're stealing. But I don't believe that people should be thrown in cages for what they put in their bodies, even though I disagree with getting strung out on drugs. Same thing with prostitution. I personally disagree with that. But I think society should use persuasion to address that issue, rather than sending men with guns and badges to go kidnap them and throw them in cages. So to me, I want things stripped down as much as possible. I want as much to be private as possible. And, I don't know if we'll ever get there, but that's kind of what I would like to see happen. And if we're not going to get to exactly where I want, then I would like to see the government rolled back as much as we can possibly get.
Right.
So in short, you believe in the power of sort of culture and people. That's the sense I get it. Just a sort of 10,000 feet view, bird's level view. That's interesting. That's really interesting, and I think that I appreciate that explanation, because I don't think that's what people hear. I don't think that's what the layman hears or thinks when they hear a phrase like that. They just think, burning the street, like the usual stuff. When they hear
lawlessness. They think of The Purge. Those movies, The Purge. That's what they think of.
Right.
Because we're in such a period of semantics, but it's selective semantics. So, like, people pick and choose when they're going. So, for example, they hear anarchist, and they will take that very literally. They will hear Jordan Peterson say enforced monogamy, and they will take that very literally. But then they refuse to go through the looking glass when it comes to other things. So, like, for example, over Christmas, as Baz was alluding to before we hit record, I spent Christmas intentionally in some cases, and unintentionally in others, with quite a few self-proclaimed socialists, and which is fine. And then I'm then like, but one of them, it was great. We had a really good conversation, and I was chatting to her, and we're on our Boxing Day walk, which is something of a tradition in the UK. And we go nice country walk to a nice country pub, and we're sat there and we're chatting. And she's talking about how she learned economics in the late 80s from a Soviet Hungarian guy who was explaining that, Hungarian, but when Hungary was still within the Soviet Union. And she was explaining how he taught her that market competition is no good, because market competition leads to monopolies, which are bad. And I'm like, yeah, I agree. Monopolies are bad. And she's like, right, so that doesn't work. And then I'm then asking this woman, who's probably 40 years my senior, I'm then saying, but isn't the alternative to that is state-owned, which is a monopoly from day one? But we just don't call it a monopoly. We call it state-owned. And then she hits me with, oh, I've never thought of it like that. And that's what I mean about, like, she's not doing that vindictively, but
sure,
there are lots of people who do. But that's an example of, she's never gone through the looking glass to go, oh, well, what do they mean when they say state-owned? What do they mean by that? Whereas, and then, like you with anarchist, the reason why it's advantageous for the sake of our audience to clarify what you mean by that is because, well, I was going to say it prevents. It doesn't prevent at all. It's a preventative measure
Yeah.
to dickheads in the comment section saying that you want to see the country burn to the ground.
No,
Correct.
No, just the government part of it, not the entire country. No,
right. But they'll say that whenever, and this is the point, right? Is it's like, so, because I don't know about, like you say, you know, you were a Democrat, but you had these sort of political leanings that were more conservative, and it's like, I don't even know, listening to you just then, it's not even clear to me, and maybe this is because I'm not as entrenched in the political vernacular, but it doesn't even feel like you had conservative political leanings. You just had principles. You had something in your upbringing, something in your life beforehand that lent more that way. Like, and the reason why I'm saying this is because I identify with it, because like, I look at somebody like my dad. Now, my dad he's been alive, or my life certainly, maybe he voted left in the past, but certainly my whole life he's always voted conservative in this country. And but he never pushed that on me as a kid, but he did push on me these principles, like it's on you, it's you're the one who has to take responsibility. If you want the result, you've got to put in the work. The usual shit, the usual sound bites, right? And it's like, because I was the same. Like, I'm sitting there, I'm at university, and I think I'm left wing, and I think I'm what I would now call woke left. I think that I like those values and I like those principles, until I realise that they have no values and they have no principles, because these are just platitudes. They're not actually based on anything. And if you don't even need to be politically engaged. If you care about logic, then you can't follow through with the modern left's talking points, which is something that I struggle with so much. So it's like, you know, when I'm sitting there and we're talking about they want to champion the rights of gay people, and they want gay people to live as freely as possible, but they also want to quell Islamophobia and have Islam be as free as possible and live as freely as possible. It's like, right, okay, well, those two don't get on. So what are you going to do about that? But that conversation you're not allowed to have. And this is what I mean, is like you the logical conclusion is never reached.
Basically, what you're saying, it's like an argument. So you don't know this about trading, Ben, but like in trading, there's different styles, right? And there's different types of traders, right? So, for example, there are those who trade based on the technicals. There are algorithmic traders, people who set up, nerds like me who will set up different algorithms and different programs to trade for them. And then there are people who trade based on something called fundamentals. And it's almost as if the politics here that you guys are talking about, in the case of the Jeff's sort of political journey, comes out of fundamentals. Sorry, we're just talking. You know, we're just waiting for you. Yeah, so if you are a fundamentals trader, right, your trades aren't necessarily based on technicals. They're not necessarily based on the news of the day always, right? They're not necessarily based on what the algorithm traders are doing. You are taking it back to square one and figuring out.
This is a Shaquille O'Neal trading advice. He said it once, where he was like, my advice for anyone who wants to invest, if you believe that the company is doing good things for the world and is going into the world for the better, put your money in there, like for the long term. Yeah, and this is the point: is it's based on that's actually a very principles. But it's a very good analogy. Yeah, but this is what I mean, is like it's based on principle, and this is because this is the thing. Like I wanted to believe these things so badly because it was
too, buddy.
Was right, because it was right. You know, in quotation marks, it was right to believe them. It was right to believe these things, that, you know, the whole kind of, and I still am in a lot of ways, like the whole live and let live. This is why I call myself reluctantly political, because it's like my whole bit is like, no, I didn't fucking change. You did. I was just sat here living my life, and then suddenly suddenly I get told that, oh, the fact that you're still male and you were when you were born is now some kind of extremity of position because you've never even considered it, and you think that bisexual and pansexual are actually the same thing, and so that's now an extreme position. And it's all those kind of things. Like I remember I was a youth worker in my time at university, and then when I graduated for a little bit, and I got in real shit with a manager because this is when this stuff was starting to pick up. And so this was what, like 2016, 2017. And I had a girl ask me, what does cisgender mean? And I replied, we used to call it being born. And now, and I said, it's a made up term to corral you and give you a label, because one group of people have given themselves a label. They chose that label. It used to be transsexual, then it became transgender. And now you call yourself, now they need you to have a label as well, so that everything's fair and even from their point of view. And I got told off for that, because it was like, it was you're expressing a political opinion. It's like, no, I'm actually giving the macro view. I'm not giving a political opinion. I'm stating facts as to what has happened and the historical derivation. Like, for example, cisgender was first used in 1994. That was when that word was first coined. And it's like, so, and I remember telling her that this is a word that came about in the mid-90s. And she found that crazy, the idea that there was a word, as a 16-year-old girl, that there was a word that was as old as her group leader. Like, that was wild to her. And I was like, yeah, they make these words up all the time. And then I get told that I'm pushing a political ideology or a political position on the kids. And it's like, no, I'm trying to strip away, kind of like what you're talking about, stripping back federal government. It's like, no, I'm trying to strip away the political fog so that she can make her own mind up about whether she's going to subscribe to using these new words, these neologisms that are being foisted upon her. She's sitting there going, I just thought that I was born a girl and I still am, but now apparently I'm occupying this position that's being called cisgender in opposition. Let's call a spade, in opposition to this other group called transgender. And I can't imagine what it must have been like for her, especially still being at school. Like when I was her age, I remember saying to a group of mates, like in confidence, I understand homosexuality. And I was speaking very candidly because I thought I was amongst good friends, which turned out to be not true. And I was saying, like, I understand homosexuality. They feel what I feel for a woman, but for someone who's the same sex as them. I totally get that. Totally get bisexuality. They feel it for everybody. I totally get this, totally get this. Transgenderism, I don't understand that. I don't understand this idea that you can believe that you're in the wrong body when you never made that choice. And that was honestly almost verbatim how I said it, give or take, because it was over 10 years ago. And what I got even then, so this would have been 20. You
could feel the fatwa being issued, right?
A progressive fatwa.
Yeah.
But even then, the response is, well, then you're just like, I don't think bigot was really a word that was being chucked around back then, especially not by high school kids. But it was something like that. It was very much like, oh, well, you're just bigoted. You're just refusing to understand other people. And then one friend backed me up and went, no, he's literally trying to understand it. That's why he's just said what he said. And he's like, oh, you're refusing to acknowledge these people. It's like, no, I'm saying I don't understand it. So fucking help me. And that, now looking back in retrospect, was like, oh no, it was never the point. The point was never to help me. It was, I'm not supposed to understand it. That's why they keep adding more and more letters, so that you're always one step behind. You're not able to understand it. Because if that's what they wanted, we would. Because we could easily understand it if they left the fucking thing alone for 5 minutes so that we could get a grip on it. But then the game's over. Then it's all done. It's all finished.
Well, it's because a lot of what they argue about isn't really real in the first place. Men are men. Men can't be women. Women can't be men. And I suspect that if you would have asked them to explain it, and even whether you push back or not, they wouldn't have been able to. That's why they called you a bigot. That's why they do that, because they can't defend, a lot of these people can't defend what they believe. And they're not approaching this in good faith anyway. And I think a lot of ways, this is a chance for them to virtue signal. So if somebody like you says, I don't really understand this whole transgender thing. I mean, can you explain it to me? That gives them a chance to get on their lofty perch and say, oh, you're a bigot. You're a horrible person. And I'm great because I called you out on it. I mean, they don't want conversation. They don't want persuasion. They don't want dialogue. They just want you to fall in line. And even with this whole system of categorization, this isn't really designed to move anything forward. This is designed to create various victim classes that people can belong to. In the UK and in America, you have a huge jump in the number of teenage girls identifying as trans. A huge jump. In the UK, I believe it went up by 4,000%, according to Abigail Schreier's book. And even beyond that, even in America, the number of white people identifying as Native American, because maybe they have a drop of Native American blood, or maybe they have none, but want to say that they do, that has gone way up as well. You have a lot more people identifying as non-binary. Now, for some of these people, they might actually have some issues. They might actually have some gender dysphoria. 4,000%? No, that's a social contagion. One of the reasons why is because if you're a straight white girl, especially a girl, I mean, because with men, with boys, it's happening too, but it's more with girls. If you're a straight white girl, then your status is diminished because you're not enough of a victim. You only have like one victim point because you're a female. That's it.
Yeah, because you're a girl.
Yeah. And so the way the system works is that they prioritize voices in an intersectional sense. So if you have more, if you check off more of the boxes, quote unquote, then your voice gets prioritized while other voices don't, because this promotes quote unquote equity. But to me, that's not, I've stopped believing that these people have good intentions. I think a lot of them do.
Same.
Like maybe a lot of people who get fooled by this stuff probably have good intentions, because nobody likes bigotry. Nobody likes bigotry.
Correct.
But the people who are making this stuff up and using this to enforce their will, I don't believe for a second that they actually believe a lot of it. One thing that I always say when I write about racial issues or bigotry in general, I say these people do not view bigotry as a problem to be solved. They view it as a weapon to be used against people they don't like. And when you understand that, then you can fight back better against it, because you're not assuming that they're coming in good faith. They just want to call you racist. And a lot of them get paid big bucks to call you racist.
Yeah, and this is where, when going back to what we're talking about the various failings of the right, it's like the right in a lot of ways, and I think it's the same. Like, I don't know, in America, you still have people who are willing to go out and protest, and you still have people who are willing to make noise. Britain, we're pacified beyond belief, to the point where it doesn't matter who you vote for at this point, you get the same shit. Like you get the same thing. If you vote for the left-wing party, if you vote for the Labour Party, you get the woke stuff because they have the most vocal proponents for that set of talking points. Then the Conservatives, like, I'm convinced that Rishi Sunak is there as a tactic, because he is second generation Indian, practicing Hindu, so then they can go, look, we're not the racist party anymore because we have a brown man as the party leader. In the same way that I almost think, looking retrospectively, that the Conservative Party were the ones who legalised gay marriage in Britain. And at the time, I thought, oh, well, yeah, what a real progressive move. Now I sit there and I go, like, oh, no, you did that so that then you can not be called the homophobic party. It's all chess. It's all trying to preempt.
And it never works, by the way, because they still get called it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And this is the point, is when we talk about the failings of the right, is they have the left's game plan so misunderstood. They don't, like, they think that their political ideological opponents want to be economically prosperous, start their own business, and live a free and enriched life. No,
They assume conscientiousness,
they
right?
assume conscientiousness. They're projecting.
Yeah.
They're projecting what their values are, completely overlooking the fact that maybe they just want to push their ideology on you, and that's the beginning, middle, and the end of their goal.
So you and I have talked about this before, Ben, and I'd be curious to hear Jeff's sort of take on this. Well, a couple of things. First off, I want to hear about your sort of transformation, because when I saw the midterm elections, I felt the same way as you. I was like, God dang it, these guys are just not. They're not going to get it together. So I'd be curious to hear about that. But to sort of kind of dovetail these things together, there seems to be this interesting. You put out a tweet about this a couple of days ago where you said, someone had said, progressivism is conservatism driving the speed limit, and you said this will become increasingly, or this will increasingly become more obvious, I think, in 2023. Is that sort of related to this transformation that you had, or is it? Tease that out for me, because I think it's really interesting, and I think it kind of ties to what we've been discussing up to this point, which is maybe the Achilles heel of all of this is what Ben is essentially was what Ben is alluding to, which is there is a conscientiousness here that you might yourself subscribe to. You might believe in things like decorum or tradition or rules, but that might not be universally. That might not be the case universally. So I'm curious. What are your thoughts?
I think regular people believe in a lot of the same things, like decorum and stuff like that. But the fringes on both sides don't. And guess who's in power, right? And going back to what Ben was saying too about I'm assuming you're talking about the Tory and Labour parties, right? Am I getting that right?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, about the Labour being far left, and then the Conservatives not really doing much against it. Yeah, that's the story of my life here too. It's very interesting to hear you say that, because it lets me know that America is not alone, because that's exactly what we've got going on here. Yeah.
Yep. Because I hear about it, right? Because I consume a lot. Sorry,
from me.
Go ahead.
He hears my complaining. No, he hears. I was just gonna say, you hear me complaining about it, and I talk to him about this all the time. It's fascinating because before Ben and I started doing this, I wasn't really I could tell you who's running for district in this or that place, but I have no idea what's going on in Britain. And so hearing him sort of describe English politics has been fascinating, because they're going almost in lockstep with us. Maybe just one step behind, but it's kind of scary. So anyways, go on.
Yeah. Same. Oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Jeff. Sorry.
I was going to say same shit, different accent. I mean, that's what
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And
that's perfect.
Yeah, and going back to what you were saying about what I was tweeting, there were a few different tweets that I tweeted. So one of them was conservatism is progressivism going the speed limit. Now, that's a quote from Michael Malice, who's a pretty well-known, he's a well-known anarchist commentator, author, podcaster. He does all kinds of stuff. Great guy.
Kind of a big deal.
Kind of a big deal. Yes. Yeah. I actually got to meet him in person here in Austin earlier this year. That was cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I didn't know you were in Austin. Anyways, we'll get back to it. Okay. Awesome.
Yeah. We can talk. Yeah. But I've also been posting other tweets talking about the rising authoritarianism in the conservative movement specifically. I'm not talking about the right, because the right can encompass, alt-right, I don't know, libertarian, anarchists, and then conservatives. I'm talking specifically about the mainstream conservative movement. And I've been watching this happen for the past few years. It's been kind of slow going. But over the last 2 years, I've seen these movements starting to come up. You got one called the National Conservative Movement, which is basically at the fundamental level, they have some policy ideas that I probably agree with, but then they have some methods that I don't. Like they want to use the government to enforce their conservatism on the rest of the country. And even when I identified as a conservative, I would not be on board with that. Because to me, authoritarianism is authoritarianism. I don't care which side it's coming from. It's both bad. It all leads to the same place. When you start getting to the place where you're like, I'm going to use the government, I'm going to use men with guns to force you to do what I want you to do, even though you're not hurting me or anybody else, I can't be on board with that. Now, we already know that that's what the far left wants, but conservatives were at least pretending to not want to do that, right? But now we do have this movement that just straight up says it. We should be using the government to enforce certain types of morality. We shouldn't be shying away from using the federal government to attack the left. Case in point, how many people did you see cheering for Florida Governor Ron DeSantis when he took away Disney's tax exempt status, specifically because they spoke out against a law that he was championing? Now, here's the thing. Here's the thing that was complicated. I agreed with what he did. I disagreed with why he did it.
Yeah. Right.
Like, if he had just done that directly, then I'm like, okay, whatever. But he used the power of the state to punish a political opponent. That's exactly what he did. And when I pointed this out, and this is back when I used to like DeSantis more. I don't hate him, but I'm just honestly, when it comes to the presidential politics, I've stopped caring, and we can get into that too. But
oh yeah. It's just prom king, politics on steroids. Yeah, absolutely.
It is. Yeah, my focus is on pushing liberty at the local level, because that can deal with the excesses of the state. But you had all these people cheering it. Or some people who weren't cheering it, but pretending like he wasn't doing what he actually did, bending over backwards to defend him. And I was like, you guys are right for the picking. You guys are right for the picking. Because this movement is going to come up, and they're going to use people that you like to actually carry a lot of this stuff out. And over this next year, Republicans are not in power. They have the House, but they're not going to be able to get anything passed. So the next 2 years are going to be spent with our influencers and politicians priming the base to be more amenable to statist solutions. There's a thing called common good constitutionalism, where they want to use that in the judiciary to have courts rule in a way that reflects the common good. So basically pushing a conservative agenda through activist courts. So they're the same thing. At this point, they're beyond being the same thing. So what I've been saying is like, if you vote libertarian or whatever, they say, oh, well, you're going to make sure Democrats win. Well, the parties aren't different enough to where that matters. If the Republican wins, it's not going to be different enough. And if the Democrat wins, it's not going to be different enough. It's going to be the same shit. So to me, why not push for a different solution? And there are ones that do exist. But that's what's terrifying me, because we've already got statism on the left. Now we're going to start getting more of it on the right, and I really want to fight that.
We're mining the same vein. We're mining the same vein. It's like this is like both sides are mining. Yeah, they're going in. They're actually tunneling in the same direction, and this is what I mean when I bring up the UK, because I'd like to kind of expand just a little bit to make sure that it's understood. I actually don't believe that Labour in this country is far left. I don't believe that. The far left activists support Labour, but I don't believe that the party is far left. The party is supposed to be the party of the working people. Like, so when Johnson got elected in 2019 by a huge majority, like I think it was like the biggest majority since Thatcher, I think. So massive majority, and he broke what's known as the Red Wall, which was a wall in the north of England that always would vote Labour, irrespective of how well or poorly things seem to be going, just because of their vitriol towards the Tory party. And it was very Trump-esque insofar as Trump was, you had all these people on the left when Trump was going, because, like, for example, in the UK, you would actually hear things from left-wingers, and you hear the same thing about Brexit, which is, and they will say with no hint of irony, nobody wanted Trump. And they will say that because they believe that. They believe that nobody wanted Trump to win. And what that translates to is, I don't know anybody who voted Trump.
I have no friends. Yeah.
I only talk to one kind of people. I'm stuck in an echo chamber.
Yes, because it's factually untrue to say that nobody wanted someone who got around 50% of the vote. And it's the same with Brexit. People would say nobody actually wanted Brexit. It's like, no, 52% of the electorate did. 52% of the people who casted their ballot that day did. That's why we have it. That's why we left the EU. But they believe it when they say out of their mouth, nobody wanted this. Because in their worldview, nobody did. And this is what I mean, because I was having this discussion quite recently, be interesting to get your take on it, is especially when we're talking about where we think it's going to go. Because a lot of the stuff about Trump, similar with Boris, because so Trump is obviously a business mogul billionaire, and Boris is so he's in the economic elite, but not necessarily the intellectual elite. Whereas you've got Boris Johnson, who is not necessarily in the economic elite, but is very much in the intellectual elite. He went to Eton, which for our American audience is the most prestigious secondary school in the country. Like it's the Harvard of secondary schools. And then very, very exclusive. And then he went to Oxford University,
or the Hogwarts,
and then went into politics. So he is as establishment sort of intelligentsia elite as you can get. He wrote for the Telegraph. He wrote for all the big national right-wing newspapers. And yet he got more of the working class vote than any Tory for a very, very long time, in the same way that Trump got a lot of the working class vote than any Republican for a very, very long time. And that you get a lot of these people would say, who are these idiots that are voting for him? So are they the idiots, or are you the idiot for not identifying this and why? Like your guy, who's currently the leader of the Labour Party, the Working Man's Party, is a knighted barrister. This is not Arthur Scargill. This is not a miner. This is not a man who's ever worked with his hands. He's probably got hands softer than a Tempur mattress. He doesn't know what hard work is. He doesn't know what a callus is on the palm of his hand. But this is your leader of the Working Man's Party. How? They are actually they are so similar. The similarities between someone like Boris Johnson and someone like Keir Starmer are stark. But nobody seems to be paying attention to any of that, because we're stuck in old patterns of thinking where we just think, like, oh no, but Labour are the Working Man's Party.
I think some people are paying attention. I just don't think enough are. I mean, a good example of that is the DeSantis bill, DeSantis's bill, and I know which bill you're talking about. Like that. What was interesting about that, and that you kind of made me start. You started making the juices flow in my brain on this one, because this might lend to your theory. I don't remember the exact stipulations of the tax part of the law, but I remember basically, and correct me if I'm wrong, someone correct me if I'm wrong, that he was giving them something that they kind of already had, or wasn't really going to do too much, quote unquote. It wasn't as severe as it suggested, which was really interesting to me. And it kind of lends to that idea that yeah, you know what? I'm gonna whet the appetites of these people so that they think that we actually care about this sort of moral posturing. And not only that, I'm going to use it as a training device, almost like a Pavlovian device, to start wetting them up, right? Getting them ready for the sort of next sorts of pieces of legislation, which will prepare them for what you were talking about, Jeff, which is really interesting to me. I don't. Do you know what I'm talking about? Go on. Sorry.
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's almost like he was testing the waters, and I actually don't think that that's what he did it for, but it kind of is, because he knows DeSantis is a great politician. He knows what he's doing. Yeah. And even when he first did it, I was like, yeah, they're going to come back to the table, and they'll probably get a lot of that back. And I thought I saw something to that effect. I didn't really dig into it because I didn't care. Because I knew for a fact that was going to happen eventually at some point. Like, he's not going to punish Disney that hard. Disney helped to fund his campaign back in the day. So
correct.
Yeah. So I mean, he slapped Disney. Yeah. So he slapped Disney around. And the thing is, I didn't agree with Disney. I disagreed with him. I was on DeSantis' side between him and Disney. Even with the law that they were whining about, the parental rights in education, I agreed with most of that law, even though I think that the government should be out of education completely. But if you're going to have them in government education, you probably shouldn't be indoctrinating them when they're like 8 years old. Kind of a bad idea. But my thing is,
what a crazy thing to say.
Yeah,
what an unbelievable
what a
position
piece of
to
shit.
hold.
Yeah, imagine not instructing 8-year-old kids on gender identity. That's insane. Like I can't.
Yeah,
But
yeah, you're a horrible person.
Yeah. Which, by the way, even Democrats agreed with that law. According
I remember that.
Yeah, according to polling, when they actually were told what it is, and then they were polled, they agreed with it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
but getting back to your question, I do think that was a sign to me. That was something that I already saw this coming, but when he did that and I saw the response, I was like, okay. I was like, okay, I see where this is going. And I wasn't surprised because in the MAGA movement, the More America First movement, you do have a huge strain of populism, just like you have in the UK with Boris Johnson, which is probably how he won a lot of those working class voters. That's how Trump won them. Populism. And a certain level of populism is okay, but too much of it, and then you lose all your principles. You're just going to basically do what you think people want to hear. And to me, that allows for more statism. But what I'm talking about is actually part of that. But even among the establishment, even the more establishment people, the National Conservative Movement is made up of a lot of establishment type people. And the politicians that are kind of seem more amenable to it, Marco Rubio, some others, they're not part of America First. So this is kind of an all around thing, and I got a little bit of inside baseball from people that I talked to, and the conservative movement over the years has adopted more libertarian ideas on certain topics. Right. Like when it comes to gay marriage, they think that the government should even be involved in marriage. When it comes to other issues, they're more libertarian on it. Weed should be legalized. I think all drugs should be legalized, but the conservatives will at least budge on weed. But there is a movement to get rid of a lot of that and go back to the way it was before, where they again wanted to force morality on people using the government. But even beyond that, being more willing to use the government against the left when they do things that they don't like, to use the government to punish their enemies and to specifically push conservative values. And, the prophet Jeff Isaiah is saying that we are going to see a lot more of this. That's what those tweets were about. I wanted to put those down so that when it happens, I can refer back to them later and see, I told you this was going to happen. And I think some people are still in denial about it, but they're going to see, because when you have the culture war that we have right now, and you have a populace that has a team sports mentality, where basically they will excuse behavior on their own side that they would condemn if the other side did it, then again, you're ripe for the picking. If you want to push a status agenda in the conservative movement, now's the time.
That's a really good point, because it's we are definitely seeing that. Like I saw a young guy on PragerU on one of their shorts videos where it was like he got asked, at least I think it was PragerU, but he got asked, what's a hot take that you have about the country politically, and he goes, oh, it's not team sports. That's my hot take. Is that like actually we're working towards the same goal, which is that we want a country that is as good a place as possible for people to live. We're not supposed to be working against each other. The left and the right are supposed to keep each other in check. You're supposed to have the left is there to speak for the dispossessed at the bottom, and or to put it in the Jordan Peterson framing, the way that he says it is like, the left and the right need each other. You've got the left wing, the liberal types start the companies, the conservatives run them. So provided everything's going in the right direction, great, get the conservatives in there, because they'll make sure that it's running as efficiently as possible. But you actually need the new thinkers, you need the liberal thinkers, you need the ones who are avant-garde, the ones who are not afraid to break the mold. They're there to establish new directions, and you actually need both of those things. And this is the point, because I don't know, like Baz and I, when we were starting this podcast, we put together a list of why us, like why do we think that we're in a position to be able to do this. And one of the things that we wrote down was we are like a lot of people, like you said right off the top when you said no, actually a lot of black people are pro Second Amendment. A lot of black people, you'll never hear about it, but a lot of black people have conservative values. A lot of black people are pro Second Amendment. And it's we said that, like, okay, so maybe there's a lot of people out there who are politically homeless and politically dispossessed, and they don't know where to go. And that's us. That's like I don't know. Like one of the things that I was saying to the socialist lady that I was with on Boxing Day was like, one of the things that I worry about is I'm already this cynical at 27. Like I believe that the two main parties in this country, and it's the same in the States, I believe that they push the same shit because neither of them are actually paying attention to who's got their, to what the public is actually feeling about anything. They are just like, the way I put it in the British context is the left, the Labour Party will subscribe to woke policy and put forward woke policy because some of their supporter base endorses it, and they are in fact proponents of these policies. And the Conservatives will endorse it because they mistakenly think that if they do, these people will then vote for them. Like, and it's like, no, that's not the reality of it. But they're like, we've got the leader of the Labour Party now coming forward and saying that he's going to be the one to clamp down on cross-channel immigration. The leader of the Labour Party is saying that. He said in a statement that he's going to put a stop to, if he's elected, put a stop to, which I think is going to happen. He's going to, which in 2024 as well, actually. Holy shit, that's going to be a big year. The next British election is in 2024. And we've got, the leader of the opposition, the leader of the Labour Party, the left-wing party, saying we're going to clamp down on immigration. None of it makes sense. Like,
that's interesting.
For someone like me, who's largely an idiot, I don't know what to make of any of this. Like, this is what I mean about like the idea of you just, when it's the whole thing of I didn't change, I didn't move. It's like, no, we just got blindsided with this stuff. Like, I remember having a conversation with a friend about 3 or 4 years ago, certainly before COVID, and he was probably a pretty moderate guy, but then he went to a good university, so came out incredibly woke left. And he was explaining to me that the only reason that Obama won was because he exhibited whiteness. And I asked this guy,
that's amazing.
This is a Brit saying this, and
of
because
course,
I'd heard murmurings of this from American content that I'd consumed up to that point.
And you were like, I expect that from them, but
sitting there, just going,
right.
Come on,
we're
the one stereotype that we get to level at Americans is that Americans are stupid, and now look where you've got us. But anyway, like I was saying to him, like I said, okay, what do you mean by whiteness? Like, what does that mean? And he goes, oh, well, he's well spoken and he's highly educated. I was like, okay, this might be the most racist thing I've ever heard. I don't think you're going to agree. It's like, no. Here's why it's not. And then I can't remember what he said because it was one of those sentences.
Word salads.
Well, yeah, talking a lot without saying anything. Yeah. And I'm trying to get my head around this. So then I asked him, and this is where the conversation kind of fell apart because it was, you just don't understand, or one of those sort of get out clauses. But it was like, I asked him, so does that then mean that Obama has white privilege? And I wasn't saying it as like as a gotcha.
You're such an asshole. I love it.
You should have been.
Now I'd say
I love it.
I'd say it to be an asshole. But at the time, I said it because I genuinely was sitting there going, okay. And that was when I'd started sort of listening to these thinkers like Weinstein and Harris and Peterson and the whole sort of intellectual dark web. I don't know if that's still a relevant term anymore. I can't keep up with this shit. But, listening to those speakers, and they, like, for example, I remember hearing, the reason I asked him that is because I remember hearing Peterson say, like if you have women in power, is it still do we still call it a patriarchy? Because he's like, is the patriarchy attributed to the men or is it attributed to the power? And this is what I was basically getting at with this guy. Is like, okay, so you're saying that he's exhibiting whiteness. So does he then have white privilege because he had a very privileged upbringing and all the rest of it?
You did.
And like I because and I'm sitting there going, I'll be honest, I still don't understand what he meant because I can't. I don't.
He didn't either. Trust me, he didn't understand it either. I guarantee you, he did.
Right.
Isn't that the saliency of all this though? Because going back to what you were saying, Jeff, when you can catch people who aren't necessarily sort of tearing these things down and sort of assessing them for what they are, you can really catch them. I mean, that's what makes this thing so dangerous to me. You really can catch people in the team sports game. And that's what makes, going back to the DeSantis move, that's what makes that move really brilliant. And even if he isn't aware of it, right? Like the only thing I would push back against what you were saying, and this is open for everybody to sort of kind of jump in and think on, is the only thing I would push back on is I really do think that these people know what they're doing. I don't actually think that they're completely blind. Yes, sometimes they may strike gold by accident, but even in those moments when they do, they're still going to capitalize on the effects that they capture, right, in future elections. So they're still, yes, maybe they don't have a complete understanding of what's going on, but I don't know. With each election, with each sort of cycle, I mean, even just this past DeSantis thing, this was just I think last year. It wasn't that far ago. There's going to be a honing in on this. There's going to be a fine tuning of this machine with each election. Hence, sort of the danger of all this. And if you compound that with a lack of understanding or a lack of creativity or a lack of, honestly, this is what it really is a lack of critical thought, man, you've got some ripe grounds. You've got some fertile grounds to capture people. I don't know, man. This kind of freaks me out.
Yeah, it freaks me out too. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I kind of shifted, because I see what's happening there and it's not going to stop. The thing is, I think the leadership knows what they're doing. So
Right.
when I'm talking about the leadership, I'm talking about political leadership. I'm talking about members of the chattering class. I'm talking about your social media influencers, your alternative media influencers, cable news. They know. I believe they know, because honestly, I give them too much credit. I don't believe that they're actually stupid enough to not know what they're doing. So now people at the everyday level, it's not the same. It's not even a matter of stupidity, because most people don't live in this stuff the way we do.
No.
I mean, I do this.
They have actual lives.
Yeah, exactly. I do this every day, 7 days a week. It's my job.
Right.
But for most people, it's not. So they're raising their kids. They're working on their marriages. They're going to work. Right. They're doing all this other stuff, spending time with their families. And so a lot of times people don't think critically, and that's just the fact of the matter. Just a lot of times people don't. Are you guys familiar with the NPC meme, the non-playable character?
Yeah, of course.
Right.
Yeah. When that came out, people were using that against the left. Like, Orange Man bad, or CNN tells you to say something, and you say you're reading from a script. They were 100% right. But they were also right about themselves, because they do the same thing. You can tell. I mean, and I've talked to friends about this on the right and the left. You can tell when somebody is just repeating a script. They don't even know they're doing it, because they're getting it from these people who are lying to them, who are deceiving them, who are misleading them. And I don't think that every influencer is doing this on purpose. I think maybe some of them are don't really understand either. But what happens is, you even ask them a question or you push back a little bit, and they fall apart because they're not actually thinking this stuff through. Like the friend that you were talking about, Ben, that's why I said he doesn't understand it either. Because if you were to question it, he has no idea what he's talking about. What he was talking about, being articulate and, being intelligent. They had that at the African American History Museum here in D.C. Right. They had a whole list. Robin DiAngelo, who's the white progressive version of Candace Owens, is it has that same list in her training that she uses to supposedly teach white people to be less racist. You know, they say these things are a part of whiteness: showing up on time, individualism, meritocracy, the idea that you have to work hard for what you get. That's all whiteness. That's not something that black people adhere to naturally, because we're different. You know who else agrees with that? David Duke.
The Klan.
I guarantee
you.
If you put that list in front of
Lyndon
Richard
B.
Spencer
Johnson.
or David Dukes, Nikki Fuentes, or maybe even Kanye West, they would all agree with that. So to me, and it's like your friend Ben, like I suspect that he had no idea how racist that sounded. Like if you were to go up to a black person,
I was the racist in that exchange.
Exactly.
I was the racist.
But here's the thing.
Because I'm not acknowledging whiteness.
Here's what you should have done. You should have told him to go up to the nearest black person and tell him that these things don't apply to him because he's black and this is whiteness. And you'd be there to kind of break up the fight, but just tell him to do it and see what happens. Because he would get slapped. I shouldn't say this because that just implies that black people are inherently violent.
People are violent. Well, yeah. Well, the facts are the facts, Jeff. No, this is the fight. This is the fight I had to deal with in college, dude. Like I remember I was in an African philosophy class, and I remember this math major was just like, well, we were talking about something about African cultural politics, and yeah, that dude did not like me by the end of the semester. But he was just like, yeah, well, the time is not really, it's like a different value to them. And I was like, time is a different value to us. I don't really, because I'm half, that's hence my handle on Twitter, Halfrican.
Oh, so you work on CPT then, right?
Follow him.
Oh, all the time. Yeah, I've got lots of time. Don't tempt me. I just remember like that was kind of the thing I had to push back against, all through university, which is like, people coming in and being like, well, Africans. I'd be like, Africans what? Africans like what? Yeah. Like what do we do? We don't believe in what? Being on time. We don't believe in clocks. Like what are you talking about right now, dude? Like it's crazy because I went to university, Ben, university in 2008, 2009. I'm showing my age now. And
whereas everyone else calls it 2008 or 2009. But look, let's not get into
this. This is not your moment to show off, Ben. All right, this is not your moment to show off your command of the English language. No, but that was the time where you sort of saw the seeds of these things, and I was like, am I really having to sort of have a discussion with someone on why it isn't necessarily an African trait to understand the sort of bearings of time and the meaning, the ultimate meaning of scholarship to people? Is that really where
it's one of those
I'm at?
Where it's like, who's more of the idiot if you have to say to this guy, Africa's a big place. Like,
it's also not a country.
Right. Correct. Well,
it's also not.
Spoiler alert. Yeah. No, it's just interesting to me because the more we have this conversation, the more honestly frightened I get, Jeff, because this is, it is capitalizing upon that lack of time that people have. I used to have this discussion with my dad all the time. The Americans suffer from there's great, I don't know if it was an English or an American writer who says the American mind isn't challenged, right? It's just bored, right? And politics is one of those things that I think falls under bored, right? If you tell an American, if you ask an American, any sort of basic problem in statistics, they have no idea. But if you ask them about a problem in baseball, right, or like to calculate something specific to the statistics of their favorite baseball player, they've got it, right? And I feel like politics is one of those things where there isn't any engagement as a consequence of maybe despair, if I'm being frank, and then the other being, just a lack of maybe general interest, and that is a product of the politics, I think, of the American work week, and I mean the politics of just, I mean, not even politics, just the general consequence of just living life. There is no way you have time. Like Ben and I are comfortable with ostracizing our loved ones, right? So that's why we might be comfortable with sort of diving into these things, but the average person isn't. And so now I see, like, oh, you guys are using the same formula, but using a different jam, and that's, I don't know, man. I mean, you've left something in me. It's gonna be what I'm going to be thinking about, honestly, all week. So it's interesting.
And I think there are ways to push back on it. I mean,
Yes.
I mean, and you guys are right. I mean, people just don't think critically anymore. They really don't even teach it in schools anymore. When I was in college, then there was a logic class. There were logic classes that I took in critical thinking, but they don't teach it anymore. They don't really even teach civics, and that's by design. They
That's
want us ignorant.
crazy.
They want us ambivalent. They want us caught up in sports and in other stuff. But increasingly, what I've been noticing, especially when Donnie and I have been doing these liberty spaces, there are a lot of Republicans who feel just the way I did. And I technically didn't really identify as a Republican, but that's where I had most of my attention. That's where I voted for the most. That's what I talked about the most. And, I think they want something different. They want to feel like, they realize, I think a lot of people are starting to realize that the Republicans aren't different enough from the Democrats, like I was saying before.
Right.
And especially since they've lost, like, in the last three elections, but Ronna McDaniel is still going to head up the RNC.
Oh yeah.
Kevin McCarthy is still going to be Speaker of the House. So that's why I kept saying after the midterms, I kept tweeting, they don't want to win. And some of these people want to not win, if that makes sense. The thing about the Republicans and the establishment is that their big objective is to stay in power. It doesn't matter whether they win or lose, as long as they still got that same job, they still got that same bag, they got that same paycheck. They're good. And so Donnie and I keep getting people saying, I just feel so disenchanted, disillusioned. But when I hear you guys talking about liberty and focusing local, that they're starting to change some minds. The people being being more open to not focusing on party, but focusing on liberty. You can have a liberty-minded Republican running at the local level. A good friend of mine is one of them. His name is Ross. He's out here in Texas. He ran as a Republican, but the guy is liberty-minded. He's more libertarian than anything else. But you can also have libertarians, and realistically, that's the politics that matters the most, especially in the United States. And that's what the Libertarian Party Mises Caucus is pushing for. And so to me, people are, they're saying, I felt like my vote doesn't count. I'm like, well, it'll count at the local level. And it's like I said, it seems like it's almost every day that there's at least one person saying to one of us, you know what you guys are saying makes sense. I mean, the Republican Party isn't it. We need to be focused on liberty in our communities and in our local areas and that kind of thing. So it's really exciting to see. So, I mean, I know I've been very doom and gloom, but I'm actually optimistic, as weird as that sounds.
It makes sense because it's when you strip away the crap. It's when you speak to these people about what really matters, and what really matters to them on a day-to-day basis is what's happening at the local level. It's one of the things because to add the British perspective to that, and bear in mind I am a poll of one, but it's like in Britain it's almost because when it's a US election year, that is global news. Because for example, one of the jokes that I've made with Baz in the past is that a lot of times when an American's talking about political issues or some sort of cultural issues, let's say, when an American would say the nation, a European would say the world. And that's basically because we have as many countries within the same amount of space as the US has states. Like it's one nation for 3,000 miles, and in Europe it's 30, and so it's. But they're actually talking about the same thing a lot. So in the UK, like you don't vote for, and I'm sure you both know this already. So for the sake of anyone in the audience who doesn't, in the UK you don't vote for the Prime Minister. Well, you do, but you don't. His name isn't on, or her, his or her name isn't on the ballot. It is the name of the person who's running for parliament in your constituency, and you vote for them, and then if enough MPs get elected, the party leader typically becomes prime minister. So you know that your vote counts towards the prime ministership, because you know that if I vote for the Labour MP then and Labour win, my vote counted towards Labour having the prime ministership. But we've kind of duped ourselves, it feels like, in Britain, that we vote like America, where we care about the one person who's going to take the helm. When actually in Britain, our voting system is set up so to exactly what you've just mentioned there, Jeff, which is it's at the local level, it's at your constituency, but no one's bothered about what their local MP candidates have said they're going to do for the local constituency and what they're going to do for the local area. They're focused on the guy who's going to become prime minister, which is backwards. It's because, and this is because you're the people that you're speaking to who are saying like, oh, my vote doesn't count. That's me. I feel like that guy. But then because I'm misframing it as well, because I'm thinking like, because for example, I voted for Boris Johnson in 2019. Can't stand the bloke. I feel like I had the wool pulled over my eyes. I feel like I got duped. I feel like I got goose-stepped because I really liked his rhetoric. I liked that he was quick on his feet. He was funny. In the House of Commons, he was sharp. He could come back with the line, like, and that was great. And it was inspiring in a lot of ways. But then he's just another cookie cutter WEF minion like the rest of them. But I didn't know that at the time. And a lot of people, and this is like what you're saying, Baz, about how we tend to do it, is like, we were talking about this with Josh Olin about crypto, where it's like the whole do your own research attitude, where it's like, yeah, but should people have to? Like, why can't people just live the way they want to live and trust, have faith in the institutions? Why do they need to go and look at every little thing about whoever it is that they're casting their ballot for and be like, oh no, actually, I don't know about him because he's got this affiliation and that affiliation? Why can't they live their lives with a bit more trust and a bit more faith?
Real quick, I'm curious to hear, and this might be a sudden change of gears, but I want to know what, or maybe we've already discussed it. What exactly has frustrated you with conservatives at length when it comes to maybe minority voters? Because that's something I really wanted to kind of dissect with you. And by the way, were you talking about Ross Ramsey? Who are you talking? Which Ross? Or Ross Schumann?
Ross Schumann.
I know. Yeah. Okay. I figured.
Yeah. That's my boy.
Okay. Okay. Fair enough. But yeah, I was just curious to hear what your thoughts were on that.
Oh man, that's a lot. I mean, really,
start from the beginning. Yeah. Wherever.
You know, really, just the fact that, as far as the party goes, it just doesn't want black votes. It doesn't want to do the work. It doesn't want to talk to black people. For decades, they have put on airs. They have pretended that they were trying to get black votes, mainly because they know that if you were to ask the average, say, white Republican, if they wanted the party to court more black voters and get more black people over to the right, 90% of them would say yes. So they had to make it look like they were trying, but they really weren't. When you look at conservative media, the black conservatives who they did put forward, their main platform was black people suck, basically. They had this whole...
Can you give some examples of that? We're going to get people who are going to be like, know, for that guy. Yeah.
You know, so promoting narratives designed to make it look like black people are violent, even though it's like less than 1% of us that commit those violent crimes. You'll hear a lot about 1350. Despite making up 13% of the population, black people commit 50% of the crimes. Okay, you dumbass, but what percentage of the black population is committing those crimes? It's not a significant percentage.
Right.
So most black people aren't violent. What about black on black crime in Chicago? Every time an issue comes up, like if a police officer shoots a black person and it's unjust, well, what about black on black crime in Chicago? Okay, you don't bring that up outside of police shootings because you
Right.
want to distract from it, so you don't give a shit either. Also, if you want to talk about black on black crime in Chicago, why aren't you getting on your party for neglecting Chicago? Why aren't you pushing your party to start running there so that they can replace the mayors and the city council members who are leading to these things? No, you don't care.
Not to mention, if you're interested, not to interrupt you, if you're actually interested in these things, or are genuinely interested in the sort of capacity for state violence, and look at the sort of statistics, you'd see that this affects a lot of people. So it's really interesting, right? Like, this is a discussion I've had with Ben. And it's like, it's interesting to me that these people seem to focus on that part without realizing, like, hey, these people are Americans, right? And also, these crimes statistically also affect you. This should still be salient to you, but that's neither here nor there. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Go on. Sorry.
But the bottom line is that they don't really care about this stuff. It's nothing but talking points to them. And the thing is, and they'll say, well, why don't black people vote Republican? I'm like, because they know you don't give a shit about them. They see you saying this stuff knowing that you don't really care. You're just using us to score some cheap political points. And on top of that, it's like, anytime there is an issue of race. See, here's the problem with race issues. The progressives exaggerate it. They make it sound like, they make it sound like I'm in danger of getting killed by a KKK member every time I step outside my house. That's not true.
Right.
But then conservatives, because they tend to be more reactionary, they go way the opposite direction and say, well, racism doesn't really exist in America except for in the KKK and the Democratic Party. So both are stupid. Both are wrong. But guess who gets called the racist? The one who doesn't want to engage in the conversation, the one who doesn't want to be honest, the one who doesn't want to be the adults in the room. So to me, there's just a lot of issues. And then you have that NPC thing coming into play, where when it comes to the black community, you've got conservatives who just repeat a script like 1350. Or, for a while, it was like black people just want free stuff. That's why they vote Democrat. A lot of these people haven't even talked to a black person like that. You have, there's a free stuff show. For a while, they were saying, "Oh, we got to get the people off of the Democratic plantation because they're mentally enslaved to the Democratic Party." To me, if you looked at the amount of white Americans who vote for the party that they vote for just because their families did, it'd be the same. I guarantee you, whether it's Republican or Democrat. And now, when it comes to the black community, there's a whole history about why black people vote 90% for Democrats. But these people don't know that history, and their influencers don't know it either, or they don't care. So they just tell them, oh, well, Republicans freed the slaves, Democrats did the KKK. And then they skip over what happened between freeing slavery and the civil rights movement. And there's a reason why they do that. One, because they don't know what happened. Two, because the ones who do know don't want to talk about it. They don't want to talk about the Lily White movement.
They're wise enough.
Yeah. They don't want to talk about the Lily White movement, where the Republican Party kicked black people out of the party. So they started going to Democrats. I did a whole thing on YouTube about it. So people don't want to understand the context. They're not very intellectually curious on this issue. And I do blame the media and the politicians on the right, because they don't really care about whether black people come over or not either. So they just keep lying to their audience. They keep putting up people like, Candace Owens, others who just basically tell white conservatives that black people are mentally enslaved and that's why they won't vote Republican. So, because I think they know that if white conservatives knew the truth, then they would make more demands on the Republican Party. So it's really, in my estimation, it's designed to keep them ignorant. I mean, some of these influencers talking, I'm like, have you ever even spoken to a black person before? But they haven't. They've maybe spoken to one or two that they work with that may share their beliefs, but they've never just hung out with regular black folks. And a lot of that isn't even their fault. I mean, that's the way our country is divided up geographically. The average conservative lives in flyover country, right? Not a lot of black people out there. So that's not their fault. It's not that they're racist. But at the same time, if everything that you know about black people comes from the media, then you don't know anything. I mean, speaking of Ross, we had this conversation. He grew up in Dime Box, Texas, which is about an hour east of where I am, out in the boondocks. And for the longest time, he had interacted with maybe just a few black people. But most of what he knew came from the TV. So he thought that black people were a certain way, that we did things a certain way, and that the people that he knew where he lived were just the exception. Then he got into the military, started traveling, meeting more black people, and found out that he'd been lied to his whole life. It's hilarious.
Yeah, that's funny. I mean, I have to laugh or else it'd make me cry. Yeah, go on. Sorry.
This is
Yeah,
well, that's why I'm sort of sat here dumbfounded. It's like you're laughing and you're saying I have to laugh else I'll cry. I'm just because I'm now like too overt about it. If I'm speaking to somebody who a white person in particular, normally female, but just white person, and they are spouting off the usual talking points about black oppression, incarceration, the usual shit, you know, the normal bullet points. And my first knee jerk reaction is, "Oh, okay, you don't have any black friends. You've not spoken to you maybe you do have black friends, but you've never spoken to them about this. You've never spoken to them about what they think because you don't feel that you need to because you think you understand them all already perfectly to a greater degree than they could ever understand themselves." It's like because when you're talking about the Republicans here, Jeff, like what I'm hearing is it's almost like they're just kind of hoping that one by one black people will do a Candace Owens, find this stuff out for themselves and migrate across. Like they don't think that they. And then the other thing that I can't help thinking, I was thinking this when you were talking earlier, is like, and is about the. So we had Maurice Sharp on the podcast, who, if you don't know who he is, he would write. He now focuses a lot on leadership versus stewardship and talks about leadership practices in the workplace and how to be a better leader and what he would call being a better steward at work. And he works for Apple. And Baz, please fill in any of the key points that I'm missing.
He wrote for Apple for 20 years. Would write key points for the big man himself, Mr. Steve Jobs. So.
At the keynote speeches, so at all the product launches, and so he was talking a lot about. Oh shit! I've lost my point now.
My bad.
What were we talking about? No, it's my fault because I brought up Maurice, but I was gonna.
You're talking about leadership versus stewardship and how it's all connected. Okay, you were talking about a young. You were talking about a young white person. You said white woman, which I thought was redundant, and about how her beliefs connected, how she would say certain things, and it would convince you that she didn't actually interact with any black folk, and you were connecting that to what Jeff was saying. Does that help at all?
I'm trying. Maybe it'll come back to me at some point.
Maybe it'll come back. Maybe it'll come back.
Oh no, yeah, that was it. It was the idea about Republicans. Kind of one of the things that we were talking to Maurice about, or Morris, was the idea of people like living in potential land. Like this is one of the things that I sort of put to him when we were talking about like one of the reasons people are afraid to progress. One of the reasons people are afraid to clamber up in the world and try and get ahead in the world is because that's quite difficult. It's far easier to stay on the sidelines and speculate. That's more comfortable. It burns less calories. It's more efficient, and it feels like that's a lot of what the Republicans are doing in the States. Is like when you talk about how they want to not win, because it's far easier to go on news programs and go, the Democrats are awful, it's all shit, it's all rubbish, they're ruining the country, than it is to do something about it. And that's what it certainly feels like from my perspective. And then for any of our British, particularly English viewers, think of it like all your friends who love football, they will never speak positively about the England team going into a World Cup. They will always talk about how England are going to go out in the World Cup, because then when they do, they can sit there and go, see, I told you so. And they like just being right. Just for that little moment, they're willing to suffer all these defeats and all these losses, because when the inevitable loss happens and the prophecy self-fulfills, they can then go, you see, I told you so. And that's what it feels like a lot with regards to politics at the moment. Is like it. Like, I even remember watching this with like when I was watching The Apprentice when I was in school, and you'd see it amongst these candidates on the show, and they'd be spending the task that they'd get given. I don't know how similar the format is between the States and Britain, but they'd be given the task, and then they go off and do the task, and they get split into teams. And of course, at the end of it, one of them gets fired. And it was almost like they were spending so much time during the task, rather than executing the task as well as they possibly could. What they would want to do instead is wait for their teammate to trip up, so that then they had ammunition for when they go into the boardroom, and that they could then throw them under the bus and go, "You see, yeah, look, you did that terribly." And that's honestly what it feels like. And this is why maybe that's a better analogy than I initially thought, because that's why I say, like, particularly in Britain, I feel like the Tories and Labour are the same. They are the same group of people. They went to school together. They all know each other. These aren't different people. Like, as much as I hate her, the only one who really, or dislike, I should say, dislike her, one of the ones who legitimately sort of came up through the ranks from just doing a normal working job is AOC. Like, we haven't seen that in Britain for ages. Someone get to the top of politics who actually, on either side, who actually had a pretty ordinary, amiable working life before they went into politics.
Yeah, it's interesting because the way it's set up here, basically, because it's kind of similar to what you're saying, but I was talking to Larry Sharp, and he put it very nicely. The Democrats are the party of bad ideas. The Republicans are the party of no ideas. So what happens? That's why statement. It is a very damning statement, and it's 100% true if you think about it. Because what do Republicans spend this year doing for the midterm elections? Complaining about Democrats. Republicans are great at pointing out where Democrats are wrong, because Democrats have some shitty ideas. They want to expand the size of government. Republicans pretend not to, but Democrats are honest about it. There will be a problem. They will see a problem, and Democrats will say, "Here's our government solution to solve that problem, American people, and we'll alleviate your burden." Republicans will say, "That's a crappy solution. That's a crappy idea. Here's why it won't work," and then that's it. Guess what? The problem is still there. The problem still remains. So what Republicans won't do is say, "That idea sucks. Here's why. Here's what it's going to do to you. And then here's what we're going to do to solve that problem." They don't do that. Even in this past election. Kevin McCarthy.
No, go on.
So Kevin McCarthy came out with that commitment to America, because I think some of them kind of recognized that they had this issue. But it was kind of a half-assed plan. It was very ambiguous. And Mitch McConnell didn't want to do that in the first place. Mitch McConnell just wanted to bash Democrats because they don't care about winning.
It works.
So
yeah.
So he came out with this plan. Then they never talked about it again, and it's just par for the course. And it's not even that conservatives don't have ideas; they just don't really bother to problem solve. On education, they've got school choice. They just don't know how to sell it. On other stuff, what I'm saying is more right. They have no ideas for how to fix the problem. So they think they can get by on complaining, because sometimes they win when they do that. But again, they don't care whether they win or lose. So that's why we're stuck in this situation. That's why Democrats will end up getting what they want, because the American people will say, that might be a crappy solution, but it's probably going to be better than what I'm dealing with right now. So that's how it happens.
Interesting. There's a point. So because go on, Baz.
I was just going to say, and Larry Sharp told you this. Larry Sharp, for just our listeners, ran for the 2022 gubernatorial race, and he's a well-known libertarian. So that's actually very interesting and very, it's like very all these people are smart, and you always just forget because they get shrouded by the machine. So that's really interesting. Go on, sorry.
Well, no, it's because I've been thinking about this when you meet politicians, and this is why I bring up somebody like AOC, is like, there must have been a time where she wasn't just a jukebox for rhetoric. There must have been a time where she could actually coin her own thoughts. Like, if you went into the restaurant where she was working, surely she must have been capable of small talk. Surely they must have been capable of normal, jovial conversation. Because I think about this, like, I went to a talk where Stanley Johnson, Boris's dad, was giving a talk about his life, and he's lived quite an interesting life. And then Grant Shapps, who is our Minister for Transport, and was my local MP for a long time, was sort of hosting it. But he was just, we thought that there was a sort of mood amongst the people going to this talk. There's probably about 100 people in there. We thought that it was going to be getting to see people with the mask off, and that they were going to be talking like human beings. And they can't. They don't. They never drop the rhetoric. It's always as if there were no cameras in that room, but they were speaking as if there were. And it's just, I can't help thinking, like, when Grant, you go home to your wife and children, are you in any way capable of just having a normal chat? How was your day, dear? Or is it all about, like, your wife tries to ask you about how your day was and you respond with, so what we're trying to do in the Tory party? Like, do you have to start every fucking sentence like that? Or can you speak, is there any way that you can speak like a human being anymore? It's because this goes back to, sort of what I was saying earlier about, like, it doesn't feel like the thing about potential land is, like, yeah, so the Republicans, it's far easier to go, oh, see, well, if we were in power, we would have done that differently. We would have done that very differently. But then they don't actually want the day of reckoning to come. It's like, because I consume a lot of American conservative content, most of which from the Daily Wire. And you heard them leading up to the midterms, everything was about the red wave and how there's an oncoming red wave. And because the Democrats have just been so bad that now is the time. Now is the time where everyone's going to finally see the light. And you're absolutely right. It didn't come to fruition because they didn't do anything. They didn't go like because we get glimmers every so often. Like, you see, it was Youngkin versus, who's the other chap in Virginia?
Barry McAuliffe.
McAuliffe, that's it. So, like, you have those two, and then the Republicans get their way, but only at the 11th hour, when, frankly, something beyond the influence of the gubernatorial race happens. Like the whole school board thing and the child being moved around who was sexually assaulting girls at school. Only then, like, that one event takes place, and at the 11th hour, the Republican candidate goes, I'm going to address that. And everyone, and then the electorate love it. They go like, oh, great, well, we'll vote for you then. You're going to fix the problem. Like, but had that incident not happened with the kid in school, because, like, one of the things that I've heard a lot of the Daily Wire speakers talk about that I completely agree with is Democrats have made a fateful error in using children as a political tool. And yeah, right. And so, and now, and the then you have Youngkin, and he goes like, right, we're gonna address that. We're gonna put a stop to that in Virginia. But if that event hadn't made headlines, would he have come out and said that? Because this is something that deeply frustrates me. Is like, everything is a reaction from the right. They wait for the left to do something unpalatable and then go, right, we're going to do something about it. So why don't you just do something anyway? Why don't you just enact your policies anyway and then see what happens? Like, surely that must be an option, because the left sat there doing it. They're sitting there and they are at the drawing board and they are going, right, what can we do next? Like, okay, we'll try and legalize paedophilia. That was a joke to anyone in the fucking audience. but it's
or was it?
At least they're throwing at least they're throwing ideas around. At least they're playing around with, and they're trying to move their agenda on. Like, I say we. I'm not American. I don't even know if I'm right wing. I don't know what I'd fucking call myself. And this is where I feel so fucking homeless politically, is because it's like, all I know is that I'm not woke left. That's all I know for sure, is that I'm not that. And it's like, but that's not the basis. And this is where Baz and I feel it necessary to do Raisin Bread, is because that's not a basis for building an identity. You cannot build an identity based off what I'm not. You have to build an identity based on what I am. And all the right-wing parties in Britain and America at the moment, they are basing it off what I'm not. Well, I'm not that. I'm not that crazy. So, okay, fine. But no one knows what you are. And that's what leads to people going, the Russell Brands of the world going, I don't vote and you shouldn't either. And then people like me, impressionable people like me going, yeah, you've made perfectly logical sense, so why should I?
Even when presented with an idea like, hey, maybe focus on local politics, which may be more salient and maybe, and I mean, has been statistically proven to be vastly more influential in your day-to-day life, regardless, which is interesting.
And I would think that, I would think that people would be more excited about that because that is where their voice will count. Now I'm not saying that local politics is perfect. You got some funny business there too. There's corruption at the local level. Yeah. But it's easier to fix when you're close to it, right? But I can empathize.
I know where you live.
Exactly. Yeah. And I can empathize with what you're saying, Ben, because nobody wants to be known for what they're against. They want to be known for what they're for. And that's honestly where I've been. And I've been seeing this in the conservative movement. And I was like, what the hell do you guys stand for? I mean, and that's the other tricky thing about populism, because if you're full on populist, you don't really stand for anything. You just stand for whatever people say they want fixed. At least Donald Trump, being a populist, he was still able to articulate some things that people wanted. But the Republican Party and even the America First movement, MAGA, I don't care if you're talking establishment, America First, MAGA, they have this issue. And that's actually where I think that this whole status movement is going to be able to fill the void. Because I guarantee when they come out, they're going to have some solutions. They're going to say, we're going to do this policy, that policy, that policy, that policy, and it's all going to grow the government, and you're going to love it because we're going to own the libs while we're doing it. That's what I'm afraid of.
But we're still going to grow the government. Like, that's it. Like, but we're still going to grow the government. Like, when I was on that walk with that socialist lady, like, I was saying to her, like, and it goes back to what we were saying earlier about just stripping away. When you strip away all the jargon, it's actually incredible how you can get through to people. Because it was a great conversation. It was a very rare, like, really enjoyable conversation with her, because we actually both just wanted to understand each other's point of view. Because I was like, for example, one of the things that I was saying to her was like, just I was pleased when Kwasi Kwarteng, the Chancellor for all of 8 minutes, announced his plan to cut taxes in Britain, because I said, like, over the last 2 or 3 years, we have seen just how the government can piss away all our money and that they don't care about us. So if they're getting less of my money, I'm delighted. I don't care who's in power. Give me my fucking money. And this lady, who is a self-proclaimed lifelong socialist, is sitting there going, yeah, oh my God, yeah, I actually really agree with that. So, yeah, because you hate them too. Like, you don't like, because that was one of the things that was really weird, particularly throughout the pandemic in Britain and America, was at least in America it lined up, like, politically. Like, the people who supported the lockdown restrictions also supported Biden, by and large. And but then in Britain, you had people who voted for Boris, like me, who hated the lockdowns, but he was the one enforcing it. And then you had people who hated Boris Johnson viscerally, deeply, but loved his lockdown policies. And like nothing added up. Nothing made sense. Like in the UK at that point, where it was just like, you hang on a minute, so you hate the man, but you currently love what he's saying. So what? And this is, again, it brings it back to, so what do you stand for? You just want to sit there and wait to be told what to do, but provided you like the person telling you to do it, you'll comply. And it's like I remember saying this to my significant other regarding, it wasn't actually her. I can't remember. I think it was somebody at work or something. We were talking about getting jabbed, right? Getting vaxxed. And I was an old housemate of mine, and he was like, oh yeah, well I got vaxxed so that I can travel. So why don't you just do that and then you can travel? And I was like, oh, because I don't believe that's why you ever take a medical procedure. Undergo a medical procedure is to travel. We've never done that. And then it was the whole shit of, oh, well, you've always had to do it to go to places like Cambodia. It's like, yeah, that's to get in. We're talking about getting it to get out, which is a very different conversation. But it was the point there was, I said, like, you and I actually agree. We both want to be left the fuck alone. The difference is you're saying, right, I'll get your little jab. Now leave me alone. And all I am is saying, leave me alone one step before you. Like we are actually the same. And this is what I mean when you strip it all away, and it's like strip away the jargon, strip away the bullshit, and it's amazing how many people align on things. Like I've heard Candace Owens say it before, where she said that like she believes that most people are actually conservative, and like I think I get what she means by that, which is the idea that, you know, most people want to kind of keep things as they are, because by and large things are going all right. We're not starving, we're not living outside in the biting winter cold. Things are going quite well. We can still have holidays or vacations, Baz, for you, and like, you know, we could still do those things. So most people just kind of want to keep that going. Like, so I think that's what she means by it. I don't think she means most people are conservative insofar as like they're politically active and they want to get involved and, you know, oh, let's take over and conservatize everything. I think she just means that most people want to conserve the way things kind of currently are. I say that with a huge grain of salt because I don't like a lot of things as they currently are. But you know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like generally, like the way we get to live life, we get to eat the food we want, live in houses that are warm, and all that nice Western lifestyle.
Real quick, just because since, you know, and edit this out, Tyler, please, since we're approaching, you know, closer to the end, I wanted to hear some things from Jeff. One, I want to hear your thoughts on, because this is something I kind of have been paying very, very close attention to, which is the and maybe this is a product of what we're talking about, but this interesting surge in the black vote for Republican candidates that people, especially amongst African American males, that no one really wants to talk about. Well, some people want to talk about, but when they talk about it, they'd rather just dismiss it as non-existent. And then the other is, you know, where do we go from here, man? And what are your you've given me a little bit on what you think the future might hold, what you think is interesting, and the interesting work you're doing in order to move us in that direction. But I still kind of want to get a sort of general sense, if that, I still want to hear the spiel, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Go on.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the Democrats have lost a lot of black support, Latino too. There were a lot, and the polling leading up to the midterm elections showed that this was going to happen. Black people were more willing to give Republicans a chance. Now, this is more because of a growing disillusionment with the Democratic Party than it is with Republican efforts. Now, I have been critical of Republicans when it comes to their black outreach, but on the positive side of that, there are still people in the party who actually do want black people to come over, and a lot of them were doing good work. And I always said I'm, you know, cautiously optimistic about the Republican Party when it comes to changing this tendency. So a lot of what I complained about is still there, but there's all but it seems like some are starting to wake up. They may not. Hopefully they do. But what's happening is that the Democrats are pushing people away, especially black men. Stacey Abrams had a huge problem with black men in Georgia. She should have gotten like over 90%, and she didn't. I think she barely cracked 80%. That's a huge drop.
Well, did you see some of our talks? Did you see that? Did you see any of that, by the way? Just curious.
So, some of what?
Some of her her barber shop talks. I don't know if you had a chance to catch it.
Oh no, I didn't see those.
Well, she would ask, like, she would basically the long and short of it was her being like, "Don't worry, we have your best interests at heart. You don't actually know what you want, so I'm just going to take care." Yeah. I'll have to send you a clip later that you'll enjoy. But go on. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'll check that out. But that kind of sums up the attitude that the Democrats have had towards the black community for years, but especially over the past 2 years, once Democrats and Biden took office. If you go on Black Twitter, if you were on there over the past couple of years, you saw black people saying, this administration, these Democrats are doing for every other group, but they're putting us to the back of the bus. And they still haven't really done much for the black community. But, you know, Biden said he wanted to have a pathway to citizenship for illegal immigrants. That, you know, they wanted to pass this Asian hate crime bill. They haven't done anything for the black community. They lied, basically. And the thing is, Democrats know that they don't have to do anything because Republicans won't compete. So they'll still get the black vote. Now, a lot of black people just sat out. They didn't vote for anybody. They said a pox on both your houses. And that hurt Democrats as well. It didn't hurt them enough for a red wave, but it is a signifier that things are starting to change. And honestly, the Republican Party would be stupid to not take advantage of it. They kind of are when it comes to Latino voters. And a lot of people think that happened overnight. No, they've been pouring resources into that for years, which they should be doing.
It's been a 20-year process.
Yeah. Yeah. It's what they should have been doing with black voters and what they may be starting to do. I don't know if I have reason for optimism there, but that's what's happening. But from a liberty perspective, because you know, I'm not really invested in that anymore, in what the Republicans are doing.
Yeah, sure.
But I am very excited about the focus on local politics. The Libertarian Party, the Mises Caucus, issued that declaration last week, kind of outlining the problems that the party has had and the issues that they face. Very realistic summation of the situation that they are in. They recognize that they're not going to win anything at the federal level and maybe very little at the state level, because the way our system is set up, the two parties have worked together to make sure that third parties can't compete. It's not just the Libertarians, it's Green Party and what have you. So at the state level and federal level, they have ways of preventing Libertarians from getting on the ballot because they know that if other voices get out there, especially Republicans, they'll lose votes. So what they're doing is they're going to focus on local races, because this time around they did pretty well with the local level candidates that they ran. They got about 33% of them elected. And they ran 673 total at all levels of government. And so their reasoning is basically, what if we had run 673 people just for local races and had a 33% success rate? That would have been over 200 libertarians, liberty-minded candidates elected to office. So that's what they're going to be focusing on for the next elections. And that's where my attention is going to be. And again, I don't care if the candidate is registered libertarian, independent, or Republican, or even Democrat, as long as they're liberty-minded. You're not really going to get that from Democrats anymore. But just in case, you know, a unicorn comes along, I'll support it. So I'm looking forward to it, because I think that after these elections, when they do have these local seats, now they can start actually putting things into place at the local level to kind of curb a lot of what the federal government has been doing. And they can actually start governing so that the nation can see how a libertarian governs. See, one of the biggest problems that the liberty movement has is that most Americans don't really know what we believe. Not everybody is more of the anarchist stripe like I am. You've got minarchists, you've got, you know, more mainstream libertarians. All of them want less government than what Republicans and Democrats want. And all of them have solutions that would get government out of the way. So as that happens, this is a long-term strategy. Then this movement can get more notoriety, get more seats at the state level, and maybe eventually get to the federal level. But realistically, to make a difference in the culture, got to focus locally. So this coming year, I'm probably going to be traveling a lot. I'm going to be doing a lot with the party. Nice. Donnie is too. We're going to do a lot of stuff together. As far as my platform goes, that's where the focus will be. I'll still focus on national politics and stuff like that because it's my job. But much of what I'm going to be doing is focusing on liberty as a concept and the liberty movement in general. I want to influence as many people, as many disaffected Republicans and Democrats as I possibly can. Especially because right now we can strike while the iron's hot, because nobody likes Republicans and nobody likes Democrats anymore. They're just voting for them because of the lesser of two evils. Well, maybe we can give them an alternative. And the good thing about this is that it'll start, if this works, it'll get even more people involved in the political process in a way that they can touch. You know, you can't touch the presidency. You can't touch a member of Congress like that. You can't. Your governor, you're probably never going to see him in person. But your mayor, your city council, you can touch that. Like, So I think that this could even, I mean, if this works the way they want it to, this could bring about a real renaissance in American politics where we get back to focusing locally, because that's the way it was always intended to be. We were never supposed to be this obsessed with our president. Just like Ben, you were saying, like people were voting for their MPs, but their real sight is on who's going to be prime minister.
Right.
We've had that problem for ages. Now, this country was formed to get away from your king, but we've got our own. But that's the thing. The presidency has become like a king. And, looking at it from a spiritual perspective, we have put government in the place of God in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. When you focus more locally, it's easier to pull back from that. So there's so many different benefits. I can go on and on about this and bore your audience to tears.
No, not this audience. Trust me.
Good. Yeah. So, I can say right now, like Donnie and I were just talking about it, I don't think I've ever been more excited about a political year as I am right now. Even with all the bad stuff going on, even with all the complaints, I've never been more optimistic and more excited as I am right now. Yeah.
And look,
Fantastic.
When you start up that UK wing,
I think there is a liberty movement in the UK. I'll see if I can look it up.
That is going to be my search history populated for the next week. But yeah, there's a few in the UK, but it's just like, again, like this is something that I kind of love. I say kind of. This is something that I love about America is, try as they might, they won't. You can't quell 350 million people. You just you can't do that. And you've got rednecks who are going to get on their high horse and they're going to get out there and they're going to fucking protest. And it's like, but I do love that because Britain, we are remarkably pacified. I do genuinely believe, honest to God, I think it does correlate with the fact that we haven't been invaded for 1,000 years. Like, you tend to think everything will be all right and that you don't need to do it. And like, everything, like, for example, I am maligned in Britain because I like the Second Amendment. Like that.
Wow.
And now I think maybe that has something to do with because guns just aren't in our remit. And I think maybe it's because our police aren't armed, so they're like, at least you can. I think a lot of Brits kind of rest comfortably on the fact that, at least nobody's got guns. It's like, no, you're right. Damn near nobody has a gun, but the only people who do are bad actors.
You're right.
And if the government ever were to become a tyranny, if you don't think it already has, then who do you think are going to be able to get their hands on firearms quicker, you or the arms of government? Like, and this is what has led me to be like, because bearing in mind, the default setting of a Brit, like if you had a video game and you created a new Brit, his bar for Second Amendment support would be 0.
Right.
Or gun support. Like, and that was me. I hated it. I hated them because I was just sitting there going, like, why can't you just get rid of them? Why can't you just get rid of them? And it was like, because I didn't see the necessity for them. Like, and then I'll be honest, for me, it was during the pandemic where it was like, oh wow, yeah, genuinely, I think that's the number one thing protecting American citizens right now is the government, as evil as they might try to be, they know that there's a line, and they know that at some point, if they cross that line, they really can fight back. Like,
well, that's why when you were talking,
go on.
I was going to say, that's why when you were talking about that socialist lady at the beginning, talking about monopolies, and he said, well, no, the state is a monopoly too. The difference, though, is that that's a monopoly with guns. If Amazon becomes a monopoly, they can't shoot me, but the government can.
Yeah. So
I just wanted to insert that real quick.
No, you're right. Because then the other thing with that is it's like, but then if that monopoly, the private one, if that fails, then it dies. And if they take their eye off the ball and they stop providing good products, then that will die. And then another one will come along where the competition starts again. But if your government monopoly, state-owned, whatever, if that fails, there's usually quite a lot of bloodshed involved. And that's the sort of difference between the two in my estimation. But yeah, it's a very, like that Jim Jeffries bit in Bear, I think it was, the special where he does and it's a great bit on gun control. It's really funny, but there's a bit in there where he talks about he talks about the real reason it was written was to form a militia in case the government became tyrannical. And he goes, and I really like that, but the government has drones. Like, you're bringing guns to a drones fight. And it's like, yeah, and it's a really good line. Like, it really, and it's true. But it's like, yeah, but, you know, so does every government in the developed world now. And America is the only one where, by and large, the populace has at least some weapons to counteract. Like, you know, in Britain, for example, our government has drones and we have nothing. So I don't like. It's the
but ask them how that worked out for us in Afghanistan. We had drones there, didn't we? And we tucked tail and ran. How that work out for us in Vietnam and other countries? So yeah, it's not the same. Yeah, our military is the most powerful, but it's not all powerful.
Well, thank you so much, Jeff. It's super exciting to hear you get excited, and makes me feel better about sort of the future of certain things. And you definitely taught me something today, which is not always true of my conversations of people. So it's greatly appreciated. I wanted to say real quick, what's the best way for people to find you if you want them to find you?
Yeah, Twitter is the best way. I have a little bit of an addiction to Twitter. I might have a problem, but you can get me. It's at Jeff on the right on Twitter. You can read my stuff on redstate.com, libertynation.com. Check out my podcast, A Fresh Perspective with Jeff Charles. I'm going to be starting up again now that the holidays are passing. Check out our spaces, Donnie and I on Twitter Spaces. We do it.
You're fantastic, by the way.
Thank you.
I just want to say people to know. Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, we don't do it every single day, but every day that we can, we usually go at 8 o'clock Eastern time, different topics related to liberty. And we're talking about turning that into more of a podcast too, so stay tuned. But yeah, that's where you can see all my stuff.
Jeff, thanks so much for coming on. It's been great meeting you. I really hope we get the opportunity to do this again.
Yeah, we have to. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's been a real learning experience for me personally. Like I've loved it. So thank you so much. And then
I learned a lot too, especially about the UK.
Good. I'm glad. Well, I'm glad that hopefully, God, suddenly it's just occurred to me that I have been the UK representative to someone who knows what they're talking about. But anyway, no, thank you so much for coming on. And then to you who've been watching and listening, thank you for doing so. We really hope you enjoyed this episode. We really hope you got some value from it, because we've damn sure that we did. If you did, then please share it with somebody who you also think would enjoy it. Then be sure to follow us on Twitter at Raisin Bread Talk. Subscribe to the channel, like, comment, subscribe, and be sure to check out some of our other videos which will appear around my head.